to Within Reason with Bob Kerrigan and Bill Rankin. I'm Bill Rankin, and I'm very pleased to have Rick Outzen, who, in my opinion, is one of the best sources of information about local politics. He's an investigative reporter. He is the publisher and editor of the Pensacola Independent News, which every issue will contain some interesting investigative journalism. And the most recent issue, at least the most recent one I've seen, has a picture of a grieving mother on the front page in color and talks about a number of just terribly sad cases where parents' worst nightmare, your young adult child goes out and doesn't come back.
Right.
They're murdered. And we're trying to get beyond what we agree is a terrible problem to a solution. You pointed out that this cycle of poverty and dysfunctional families, teenage pregnancy, poor schooling or poor access to the school system and bad outcomes, and that's a problem. What's the solution to that problem?
Well, I think what I would like to see before we work out the solution has to come from the community. The solution has to come from not only the African American community but the white community working together to come up with a solution. Too many times, I think we've had do-gooders step in and cause more harm than good by not engaging everyone that's involved. But we have so many elements to it, Bill, and that's the problem, is that we're not addressing all the elements. And this really needs a countywide blue ribbon committee to bring the players to the table and start talking through, these are the assets we have, these are what the issues that we have. I mean, the city, last year we looked at the Escambia County school system, public school system, had over $50 million in unrestricted reserves. Huge amount of money. Everyone else is strapped for cash. Huge amount of money there. And whether that money is being used properly or could it be used better are part of the issue. We looked at the census. We found that over a third of the African American community in Escambia County is under the age of 20. We have a huge young population. We find out when we look at the school statistics, just barely half of them are graduating from the public school system here. We find that if they get in any kind of trouble, they're more likely to be sent through the juvenile justice system than their white counterparts. We're finding that teenage pregnancy is high. We find that we have all these community centers and very few. All the youth programs that we have at these community centers stop when they're 13 years old. So we've got this huge gap that we're not taking care of. Where if you're not an athlete and you're not doing well in school, there's not much hope for you. There's nothing out there being offered you at the county, city level. And I think we invest so little in human services in this county and in the city that we've got to address these issues, and it's got to be looked at. Job training, unemployment. There's so many pieces to it. I don't have the answer to it, but I know that doing nothing and just investing more and more into law enforcement and we can't build a jail big enough to deal with the problem.
Well, the problem isn't that the sheriff's department and the police aren't solving these crimes. They solve most of them. That's not. That isn't the problem. It's this violence by people who know each other.
And one of the things in this story that really that I thought was encouraging was that the mothers are banding together.
Yeah.
And they're going and they're visiting with mothers who've also lost kids. They are starting to try to become advocates for against the violence on the streets. And that's the other piece that needs to happen is that the community itself has to speak up and say no more. And we're seeing more of the African American, the ministers stepping up. They had a huge press conference last year when they had the series of killings that were happening in the summer. I'm optimistic we can move in that direction, but I think what's happening is the elected officials have to play catch up. They have to make this a priority, and they haven't done it yet. And I think that's where the impetus needs to go, is that we've got to get everyone to the table and start talking about it. And it's also part of the hardest part about being a journalist and a publisher is I can only take it so far.
Right, right. Well, maybe we'll see what we saw with the sheriff's department. Remember when they're talking about the sheriff's races, all these deputy sheriffs show up in uniform, and that seems to have some effect on our elected official. So maybe all the grieving mothers can show up. And,
well, you know, and that's not a bad. That's possible.
Why not?
Well, look at what happened in Northern Ireland when the mothers banded together.
Yeah.
We saw it was a major component of ending the civil war that was there. We've seen it in other countries around the world. You know, if you look at the Nobel Peace Prize winners, they're women. They're mothers stepping up and saying no more. So I may be ambitious to think that big, but it can have an impact.
But that's very good, very, very persuasive about a big segment of our community that's not doing well and is underserved. I mean, if
it's our Achilles heel, we cannot become a first-class city unless it's first class for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. And your social situation really predicts your outcome. The income of your parents, to
break the cycle.
My kids and the kids they're around have all the advantages. And I think for most of these kids, if they grew up in one of our housing projects, single mom, with all the disadvantages, they can do it. You can break out of that, but it takes an extraordinary person. In our world, that's the ordinary. They go to college.
Right. Right,
yeah.
And that's the challenge, and it's a challenge to create the support systems and to create, the village to support them to be able to pull it off. And we're not there, but we got to start moving in that direction.
Yeah. Well, it's worth doing. That's great. Here's another very interesting issue. So I think we agree. It's not really a law enforcement problem. It's not because the NRA has given us too many guns. It's just
it's society.
It's society.
And we have for too long we've ignored this problem, and thinking that we could survive without having to deal with the poverty. We could survive without we could work around. People can work around the public education system and still get a good education for their children. But when you have all the advantages,
right?
When you don't have a car, when you don't have, when you're dependent on public transit, when you're, we know just based on, you cannot, a person making minimum wage, they need to have at least 3 people in the household making the minimum wage for that household to stay above water. The minimum, there are just so many handicaps that we've got to look at. And at the same time, if we say education is the silver bullet, then we've got to fix the public education system.
Yeah, that too. That's good. It's really so easy, and it's a tendency I've tended to succumb to. Well, that's the West, got the West side, and then our side. And we ought to look at ourselves as one community.
We have to. We cannot gloss over it. We can't gloss. It's the world's too global. We're too connected. And it is what we're seeing as this crime escalates now through the community. We're seeing that it's not stopping at the interstate. It's not stopping at I-110 anymore. It's going to continue to move, and we've got to deal with it. It's not going to go away.
Good. I'm with you. This to me is a fascinating. It is kind of changing gears.
Okay.
And that is the issue of the city council's executive. Mm-hmm. What's that about? You know a lot about this issue. We talked about it before.
Well, it is. It's been one of the fascinating issues to watch with the Pensacola City Council. The new form of government, the charter that was passed in 2010, gave the mayor the sole power to hire and fire employees. That was the power that the city manager had prior to him. Mm-hmm. So it's not a new power except that it's being invested.
The city council never was.
They never had the power. They never had the power to do that. In fact, they committed a crime if they interfered with the employment of a city staff member. Mm-hmm. That was a crime under the old charter. So when the only person that they could hire was the city manager in the old form of government. They could also hire the city attorney, but in reality, the city attorney was a position that was passed down inside that department
Yeah.
for over 40
Yeah.
or 50 years. We went back one time and studied it, and it was just amazing, the nepotism that in the chain of command. The last time they had a city attorney that they could hire, they had all these applicants, and they turned them all down and took the guy who was already there without even interviewing anybody. So in all essence, they really could only they only really dealt with the city manager. And in the history of the city, as far as I could go back, the last time they fired a city manager was in the 60s, and that was when the city council was completely, the entire city council was ousted because the city council and the city manager, and I think it was O.J. Sims was the manager, had fought to get fluoride in the water. And the city went in an uproar. They voted out Vince Wibbs, Roger McDonald, pretty stellar class of people.
Yeah.
And the new council fired the city manager and got fluoride out of the water. And
oh, that's fascinating.
So that's the last time that I know of that they actually fired a city manager. So now we go into a new world. We come into a new world. City man, you have a new mayor, and the city council gets all upset. One is they can't have just a staff person help them. The mayor assigned a staff person who had been with the city for over 20 years, I believe, Elaine Major, making somewhere in the 40s, maybe 50s. That was not good enough. They had to have an executive, which at one time they were talking about spending $100,000 for the position, even more than what they wanted to make, more than the mayor. And we ridiculed them and made fun of them, which probably I shouldn't have done. But in essence, for 2 years, they couldn't decide on what this person was. And then they got upset because they couldn't hire them. They had to go to the mayor and ask the mayor to hire them for them.
Right.
And that upset them. And not that the mayor has ever denied the use of staff to help them.
But the mayor has not restricted them.
No, he hasn't. He's restricted their communications. But if they ask for help, as far as I know, I don't know of any time that they've asked for a staff member to help them draft an ordinance or whatever, that they haven't had cooperation with the mayor's office. But that became a big issue for them. It took 2 years. They hired several people. They turned down they sent out job offers after long periods, and the person would look at it and say, "Why do I want to work for these 9 people, 9 bosses?" And they finally went to Landrum to get a rent manager, a rent executive. And right now, before the council, they're looking at bringing her on. They're looking at whether or not they want to bring her on full time, if the mayor will concede to it. They want to pay, I think they had her paying her somewhere in the 60s. They want to move it up to the 80s. But the cost of bringing in, we have 2 more policemen on the street for the cost of what this person costs the council. But it's been a bizarre thing to watch.
And you think the better argument is they don't really even need such a person, or maybe a lower paid staffer?
They have yet to show that where they have something that they need this for. I mean, the city council is a part-time job. It's never considered
it's certainly paid like a part-time job.
Well, it should be. It's not. They're not many mayors. They come to a meeting. They decide policy. They vote on the mayor's recommendations. If they want to discuss an issue and research something, they can do that. They can ask for help doing it. There's an element on that council at one time, and it may not. And the new council is still working itself out. That saw it as an adverse relationship.
Yeah.
Well, and there was no real indication from Ashton Hayward, the first strong mayor, that he wasn't going to cooperate with them as far as giving them the support they needed. The problem is are we building a whole separate bureaucracy in a city that's financially strapped? There seems to be no one on the council's part saying that
there seems to be a certain amount of petulance. What has been going on is, and we've talked about it lots on this show, the public sector pensions have been a real threat to the financial health of the city. And the mayor's got some great people who helped him. They're working through that and negotiating with the city employees to get a grip on this problem. But and nobody's come out and said this, but I perceive that one problem they've had is just take for example the police union. Well, they can just kind of hold back, because if they go through impasse, then they come back to the city council, and they might have the perception that the city council would, put them back on the gravy train. What the city council, of course, should have done was make it very clear that that wasn't going to happen. But the city council was too busy asserting themselves. I mean, Sherry Myers filed, was it an ethics complaint or another lawsuit or
She
something?
filed an ethics complaint, and she has a lawsuit.
The mayor stood up in a public meeting and said he was going to veto a bill, and there were 2 city council persons present, which she interpreted as a violation of the Sunshine Law. Do I have that right?
Right. It was a press conference. Right.
It's a press conference. And so what exactly is wrong? He shouldn't discuss his plans to veto at a press conference, or they have to kick city councilmen out and let everybody else in? It's just ludicrous. It's just silly. I mean, my reaction is, what is this person doing in public life? This is just stupid. What a waste of time and effort. And these lawsuits and...
Well, what's happened with what happens with politicians, and we see it a lot in elected officials, is they forget what's the most important thing.
Right.
Their ego is the least important thing in the room. Their perception of power is the least important thing in the room. The most important thing in the room is the person sitting in the audience. That's the most important
That's who
thing.
they're working for,
That's
the taxpayers.
That's what they have to work for, is to figure out how to make that person's life better. That and it's spending 83 or 84, 85 or whatever they want to spend on a council executive going to help that council member make that person's life better? And I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
But we're in this train of thought that they've been this path they've been on for 2 years, and they're going to do it. They have a huge budget. They're going to keep. They're adding. It's immeasurable as far as from the public's perceptions what this has done, how it's made life better for the city to have this position. Is this more important than adding more help at the rec centers?
It's a lot
It's
of
just
money.
crazy.
If you pay somebody, and I don't know anything about is it Dr. Cox?
Right.
Dr. Cox. I don't know anything about Dr. Cox. She's got a PhD, which is impressive. But if you pay her $84,000, it doesn't cost the city $84,000.
No, you have a multiplier somewhere at 20 to 30%.
Yeah, sure. There are health
usually.
benefits and all the other stuff that goes along with it, and so it's going to cost the city well over $100,000 to have this person, which by all accounts we don't need.
Well, having watched government, I was on the Gulf Breeze City Council for 14 years, and you watch it, is government always finds money for what it wants to spend money for. It wants everyone else to be frugal but themselves.
Yeah.
And this is going to be interesting to watch. I assume that they're going to go ahead and hire the person. I think that they're going to do that. The mayor will approve it. They've set up a budget for this. But I wonder who's going to watch and see if this person actually produces something of merit, or has this become another position that just sits there as forever? Well,
you are. You're going to watch and see what happens, and you're going to report on it.
But it's going to be the challenge is going to see. And she's pretty much been invisible for she finished her 90 days. The council seems to be running better, but I think a lot of that has to do with P.C. Wu as the chair.
Well, they did make a good decision there.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, too.
Because Mr. Wu really has the tenure and apparently the temperament to...
Well, and he's there for public service completely. He's not thinking for another office. He's not. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like he's too status quo, but as a whole, I'll accept that he is honest and he is
a force for stability and reason
that's needed.
Yeah. Good. We don't have too much time left, but we don't ever want to go through one of these shows without talking about the Community Maritime Park. What's going on over there?
Well, do we need to break, or are we in good shape? We can keep going? We need to break?
All right, we're going to take a short break.
Let's do that, and then we'll come right back.
Very good. Okay.